So autumn is upon us, at least here in Norway, and it's time to think about traveling again. Maybe going somewhere for the winter. You may be in a similar situation where you want to go traveling, and I want to give you the best tips for booking flights and getting the cheapest tickets possible. Before I get into today's video, I want to mention that I actually wrote a book about this very topic, about traveling, ultralight backpacking, minimalism, traveling for fruit, that sort of thing. You can check it out here. And it's a book worth reading, I think, if you're interested in traveling cheaply on a budget, or even traveling without money altogether. There's also more information in the book about booking tickets specifically. So be sure to check that out. Booking flights is kind of a time-consuming thing. It can be sometimes, at least if you're looking for the cheapest possible option. There are a few tips and tricks, however, that I'd like to share with you today. And over the last 5-6 years, but even before that, I've been traveling a lot. And together with my brother Mats, we've been traveling together for the last 5 years. Going around the world several times, pretty much. And we've been getting pretty good at finding good deals online. And, I'm sure there's plenty of ways to do this, but I'll show you how we do it. So first of all, skyscanner.com, okay? Skyscanner.com. It's a website where you book flights, where you find flights, and it's actually the best site that I've come across. The first important thing to remember when searching for flights is flexibility. If you can be flexible as to when you leave and when you come back, maybe even book one-way tickets, which is what I do most of the time. If you're flexible, you're more likely to find a good price. If you have to go on a specific date, then you're, depends on the prices that day. So first of all, you want to look through many different days so that you can see how the prices differ, and you just go for the cheapest price. So flexibility is one important thing in finding these cheap prices. The other thing to keep in mind is the day that you book your flights. And this depends a little bit on your location, but I've heard that Tuesdays at 3 p.m. or something like that, I'm pretty sure it was Tuesdays, is the cheapest time to book, whereas weekends tend to be the most expensive. And this has to do with when the airlines launch their campaigns and that sort of thing. So midweek, probably a best time to start looking for a flight. I'm not saying you have to travel midweek. I'm just saying your booking session, when you actually book the flight, that should happen midweek. And then in terms of what days of the year are more expensive and which one are more cheaper, it's obvious, when people want to travel, when it sucks, when the weather sucks where you're at, if there's a destination that is close to where you're at, where a lot of people go there during the winter, that it might be more expensive during that period. Holidays more expensive. Weekends tend to be more expensive. People usually travel home on Sundays and that sort of thing. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes the search engine, Skyscanner or other search engines, will actually not find the cheapest route between your origin and your destination. Sometimes it could be a good idea to search between individual distances. So for example, let's say you're traveling so right now I was looking at between Norway and Réunion, which is one of the French islands outside Madagascar. I was looking at that, and then I realized, you can search for Oslo to Réunion, and they will have a certain price, and there might be a certain combination of flights. But you might be better off booking a flight from Norway to Paris, and then Paris to Madagascar, and then Madagascar to Réunion. Or you might be better off booking a flight to London, and then London to Réunion. Or, basically experiment with making your own combinations rather than just letting the search engine do that for you. And also do keep in mind that it might be cheaper for you to travel, in this example, for example, Oslo to Paris, and then spend a couple of nights in Paris, and then 2 days later there's a really cheap flight from there onward. So be flexible again, I guess, in terms of, do you have to travel directly? Do you have to travel non-stop? Can you spend a few days in the city on your way somewhere else? Like when we went from Costa Rica to Thailand, we spent one night in New York, Because if we went Costa Rica, New York, the whole flight was Costa Rica, New York, Oslo, Thailand. It was one long flight, but it turned out spending the night in New York allowed us to take a flight the next day, which was cheaper to Norway. Whereas if we just booked the whole thing in one go, it might have chosen a different flight just because it emphasizes, that you keep going. So being flexible in that sense, sleeping in airports, it's terrible. I hate sleeping in airports, but it's possible if you want to sort of stay there for free while you wait for your flight the next day. Or you go into the city and you spend a couple of days there and you get some experience out of it too, and you stay in some cheap hotel or something like that. It might still turn out to be cheaper than booking it all the way. Depending on the airline, sometimes there are cheap options very close to the departure date. But generally speaking, the earlier you book, the better. But then again, if you book too early, then you lock yourself in, and I kind of like to stay open and a little bit spontaneous when it comes to where and when to go. So I recommend booking your flights maybe at least a month in advance, but maybe a couple of months before you're actually leaving. That way you're able to usually get better prices than if the date is coming up, because the prices tend to rise as you approach departure date. Sometimes though there's campaigns and super cheap prices right before departure date, but that's not something you really want to rely on. Another tip is to keep an eye on the flights on Skyscanner or otherwise for a few days and even weeks. Sort of kind of keep a look at it and spend some time researching without being frantic about it. Just like get to know the different prices and the different airlines and where they're flying, and basically do your research, because the more research you do, better you're able to find the cheap prices. But then again, if you think about it, if you spend like hours on end researching to find cheap flights, you could just spend those hours working instead and make money and then pay for a more expensive flight, right? So you do want to consider the fact that time is money, right? Or time, energy spent, basically, and whether you spend that energy making money or researching flights, that's up to you. You don't want to be too stuck on having to find the cheapest prices, but basically that's all the tips really. So it's just to sum it up, you want to use skyscanner.com. You want to be flexible in terms of departure date. You want to make sure you book it midweek. You want to experiment with making your own combinations, not just letting the search engine do it for you, but actually trying to put in intermediary destinations and flying from there to there and there to there. Maybe even putting in a night between here and there, maybe even a couple nights, maybe even up to 3 or 4 nights, staying in a city because there's a really cheap flight going from there 3 days later, something like that. So make your own combinations basically. Other than that, it's an endless, the World Wide Web is full of so many deals and offers. You can drown in it sometimes. At a certain point you just have to book something and just go for it. That's the most important thing, that if you want to go somewhere, just go there. The flights tend to be the most expensive part of a trip, for me anyway. Once I'm there, I tend to live pretty minimally, just buy my food and rent somewhere to live. It's even possible to live for free if you're doing something like woofing or work exchange, that kind of thing. So money shouldn't really be a limiting factor whether or not you go. At least as long as you can buy the tickets, off you go onto your adventures, and even if you go broke after a month, you'll find a way, I am sure. You can learn more about that sort of thing in our book as well. So go ahead, book your tickets. Have any more questions, you could always send us an email or you could comment down below. I might see it. I see all the comments, but I don't always respond because there's a lot of comments. So I hope that helped you a little bit, and hope to hear about your travels. See you later.